Ball of Collusion is a bestseller. Ball of Collusion collects in one place everything you need to know about Spygate. Ball of Collusion is a must-read. Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I want to compliment you both for your thoroughness in Ball of Collusion. I'm following the Andrew Luntz rule, Frank Luntz rule, which is say the title of a book 7 times, Ball of Collusion, Ball of Collusion, so people will know to get it. But it's comprehensive, and at the same time, you drill down on what I've always thought is the key meeting. January 6th, Trump Tower, Jim Comey closes the door and doesn't tell the president what's going on. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it's certainly fair to say that he doesn't give him a full read on the investigation, while I think certainly from President-elect then Trump's standpoint, he was led to believe he was getting a snapshot of what was going on. But it was, as I try you in the book to give a thought experiment relating what would have happened if Comey had told the president exactly what was going on, like actually what was going on, if instead of just giving him the salacious details of the Moscow hotel stuff, he had said to him, "Oh, and by the way, we've been in the FISA court for about 3 months. We've told the judges that your campaign is in a cyber espionage conspiracy with the Kremlin. As a matter of fact, we're going back next week to get reauthorization so that we can continue conducting surveillance on people close to you." And what we've told them was that Paul Manafort was basically the point person between your side and the Kremlin side, and we had Carter Page doing some running back and forth, and Michael Cohen. I think Trump's head would have exploded, and they would have had no reasonable explanation or expectation that the investigation could have continued. So the challenge here, since this really was the insurance policy, as they put it, it was to have a monitor and a straitjacket on the administration. And the challenge for the FBI was to give Trump a comfort level that he wasn't a suspect in order to prevent him from shutting down the investigation when he was in a position to do that, and then structure the investigation in a way that they couldn't collect evidence without collecting it on Trump.
It is a brilliant counterfactual on pages 311 and 312 of Ball of Collusion. I want to read with the assumption that people understand what the Steele dossier is in this audience, Andrew McCarthy, and they understand all of the details of what happened. Your counterfactual, if Comey had on January 6th said to the president, "Although the intelligence community has not been able to verify these Steele dossier allegations, the FBI has great confidence in the former British intelligence officer, Mr. President, who provided the information to us. Therefore, in October, just 3 weeks before your election, we in the Justice Department incorporated these allegations in an application to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court for a warrant to monitor all of Carter Page's communications, including from when he was in Moscow in July, allegedly meeting with Kremlin operatives on your behalf. As a matter of fact, in the next few days, we're planning to reaffirm the same allegations about your campaign in the Kremlin in another warrant application so the court can renew the surveillance for 90 more days. Come to think of it, that would be the first 90 days of your presidency. So congratulations on that. You're right. It would have been Mount Vesuvius. But you know what? That's what they should have done because he's the president of the United States.
Of course, I think they owed it to him to do that. And obviously they didn't. And I think while you're quite correct to say that January 6th is a key date, we can't forget that it happened the day after, obviously, January 5th, which is when Comey and then acting Attorney General Yates have this meeting in the Oval Office with President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the National Security Advisor then, Susan Rice. And we know because of a memo to the file that Rice writes on her way out the door after those last 2 tumultuous weeks of the Obama administration, where she says that what the meeting centered on was, as Obama apparently put it, what information about Russia should we refrain from sharing with the incoming team? So I really think that this was a plan to keep the investigation going, to sustain it while Trump was still president. And I really think the only way that you could pull that off would be to look him in the eye and tell him he's not a suspect and give him a comfort level about that, and then structure the investigation so that it was an investigation of him.
You would have to be so self-righteous. You would have to be so dismissive of the vote of the people. You'd have to be James Comey to pull off this, and John Brennan. But it begins to leak. Evelyn Farkas, as you quote, lets the cat out of the bag that they have been trying to push the narrative out. At the end of your book, Ball of Collusion, Andrew, I don't think anyone can argue with this, and therefore I am expecting the Inspector General to hammer everybody. Do you expect him to do that?
I think there's going to be a good deal of hammering, you. I think that, already there has been in connection with just a sliver, and it really is just a sliver of what the IG is looking at over Jim Comey's memos that he wrote about his contacts with President Trump. I wish, and because we've talked about this for a number of years now, I was a total skeptic about this at the beginning when people said that the FBI had run to the FISA court with the Steele dossier without verifying it or vetting it or corroborating it. I treated them like they were the tinfoil hat crowd, because that's not the way the FBI operates. Now, looking at this closely, I don't think there's any way that you can refute the idea that that's exactly what they did, and that's wrong about 8 Ways to Sunday. I think it's so wrong, that far beyond what the FBI and the Justice Department did here, which is inexplicable. I want to know what the FISA court was thinking about signing off on these warrants, because they're so, and those of us who've seen FISA warrants in the past, if you look at these, they're so obviously inadequate. You have to ask, what was going on here at the court?
Yeah, I've told this audience many times. I reviewed hundreds of FISA warrants for Attorney General Smith and Meese as their FISA special assistant before there was a National Security Division. I've never been able to understand this. I've never, ever believed it was up in the up and up. But in tandem with Ball of Collusion, I have been reading Jack Goldsmith's book, In Hoffa's Shadow, about Bobby Kennedy's abuses at the Department of Justice in pursuit of his personal vendetta against Jimmy Hoffa. And that was all supposed to end with the church committee. This was never supposed to be able to happen again. And clearly, you get a good FBI only if your director, and you get a good CIA only if your director are committed to the rules.
Yeah, you and I both worked long enough in the government to know that, if you get good people, then things operate the way they're supposed to operate, and they can operate very well. If you get bad people or people who are not solid, then it really doesn't matter what the rules are, because those people don't think the rules apply to them in the first place. But you can't get, there's no org chart that you can set up that's so perfect that you can assure that you're going to get good performance. The personnel really is policy in government. That's the way things are.
I'm sure U.S. Attorney John Durham is reading Ball of Collusion. I think everyone who's involved in this investigation is reading it. Comey is certainly reading it. I'm not sure Mr. Mueller is, because I don't think he's well. But I do believe that everyone who's likely to be a target of the IG investigation and John Durham are reading it. Do you expect that we will have an account? I really want to know what went on after the earthquake of November 2016 in the executive branch with the widespread dispersion and unmasking of sources. That it just looks like an effort, a transparent effort, to cripple the Trump administration before it got out of the gate, and to a large extent, it worked.
Yeah, I think that's one aspect of it, Hugh. I think the other aspect is, once Mrs. Clinton lost, which was astonishing, not just to the country, but I think mainly to these people who conducted this investigation in every expectation that she would win and this all would never see the light of day. They knew that in 10 weeks, Trump was going to have access to all the intelligence files of the government and would know that they conducted this investigation of his campaign. And therefore, they had to make a decision. They had to decide, should we just stay quiet about it and see what happens when Trump learns that this happened and let him decide how to present it to the public? Or should we use the time that we still have control of the levers of government to project the notion that there really was something here that warranted investigation? And I think they opted for choice two. And as I try to show in the book, the Obama administration had a long history of politicizing both our intelligence product and our law enforcement processes. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that when it got to November of 2016 and they needed a new narrative to rationalize Mrs. Clinton's defeat, they were able to come up with one pretty quick.
So, last question, Andrew McCarthy. For all the details, it's sort of like the whole season. Now we're going to go into the playoffs. Ball of Collusion available at Amazon bookstores everywhere. Get Ball of Collusion. Are you in the prediction business yet, Andrew? You've always been hesitant to make predictions. Are you in the prediction bit yet about indictments and how far they will fall?
Yeah, I still think that indictments, for two reasons, indictments are, I don't want to say they're unlikely because I could certainly see some, but I think that you don't want to make indictment the price tag of getting accountability here. What you said a minute ago is exactly right. We need to know what happened, and I think that between the Durham investigation and the comprehensive Horowitz investigation, we're going to get at least a factual recitation that's reasonably close to what happened. I do think that there are patches of this they won't be able to tell us because they involve foreign intelligence services, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack. I also think, though, that if you make indictment the price tag of finding out what happened, we won't find out what happened.
30 seconds. Explain why not. Because of the long trial process, because of the fact that the government will have to go very slow in revealing what they have in their cards?
And also because if people think that what's going to happen here is that they're ultimately going to be indicted, it's harder to get at information. And from a public interest standpoint, it's much more important to us that we know what happened and we can fix our procedures so it doesn't happen again than whether people get indicted, which is a secondary consideration to my mind.
As always, measured and thoughtful. Andrew C. McCarthy's brand new book, Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Must reading for anyone following Spygate, and you ought to be following Spygate. Thank you, Andrew. Let me also